Hey guys, and welcome to another Factorio Friday Facts discussion. Today they talk about rail segment visualization, if I could talk, and a few other things in terms of item stack optimization and blueprint library trouble, which probably quite a few people have run into. I know that a lot of bugs, like our seating said, previously, a lot of bugs were related to the blueprint library, which isn't too surprising because it was a brand new feature that I would imagine is quite complicated. So we'll start at the top here because this is fairly exciting. After weeks and weeks of going through bug reports and fixing stuff, after all 015 was one of our biggest releases, I would say definitely the biggest, it seems that we're approaching the end of 15 stabilization. The wishful plan is to have a stable candidate for 15 next week. Sadly, this will change our attention to just different category of bugs that we plan to fix for 16, as they are not so critical and changes required to fix them are too big to be done in 15. So that's really good news that, within the next week, wishfully or hopefully, they'll have a stable candidate. I would say maybe more realistically within the next 2 weeks. You never know what kind of stuff will pop up. But even still, that's actually quite quick when you consider 15 was only released in, I think it was mid-April or late April. I don't remember the exact date, but that for a release as big, they've done a fantastic job eliminating the bugs as quickly as they have. So that's really, really good news here. Now on to the blueprint library, speaking of issues. So I'm not going to read every single part of this. Essentially, they had some issues with the blueprint library and having like duplicate blueprints between players. Mainly blueprint duplication problems. So they kind of explain how it works internally. They say for performance reasons, the blueprint library generates and stores CRC of each blueprint. This can be used to quickly detect a duplicate blueprint when merging player blueprint libraries and blueprints stored in a save. So it wasn't really working perfectly and stuff. So after digging, they discovered what was wrong. This is kind of what it looks like here. And then the way it works is that the blueprint is saved as it would be normally saved, but instead the data goes into a CRC engine. The problem is that our maps serializer writes current output map version automatically in a constructor. This means that whenever we change version of Factorio, which is every release at least, the CR values of the blueprints changed, which makes sense, and they were suddenly considered to be different. It's quite hard to reproduce because of this, anyway, forcing the serializer to not write the map version to output, in this case, fix the issue. So that's really good. And they were also, this is kind of interesting, I saw some people doing some crazy math in the forum discussion to figure this out. They were wondering how big the chance is that two blueprints in one blueprint library will have the same CRC. And they explained the CRC is 32-bit, so there are 2 to the power of 32 combinations. So we take into account 1 million players and assume that each of them is having 20 blueprints in their library, and all the blueprints are random. The chance that it happens at least once is 9%. You can try to calculate it yourself if you like math. Let's wait and see. And then they edit and say 4.32736 so on percent, which actually is fairly high when you think about it, considering, like they said, 1 million players and all these people having potentially different blueprints. To actually have an exact duplicate is that's actually a fairly large percent, I think. So I'm glad they fixed that though. And now into item stack optimization. I always love the optimization things because any optimization for me is good news. One of our plans for 16 is the optimization of the internal item stack representation. The current data representation of an item stack is like this. So struct item stack, item count type, count, item dynamically allocated class based on the item type. So the item needs to be a pointer, as different kind of items have different properties and can hold different kinds of data. And then this is kind of what it looks like. So post transfer notifiable item, ammo item, capsule, gun, item with entity data, module, rail blueprint, or rail planner, tool, so on and so forth. This representation is nice and simple, but performance-wise, it is bad, as whenever the item stack is accessed, it needs to access different part of the memory to know the ID or any other information about the item as it is in the dynamically allocated part. So I assume that's kind of like what this is representing, maybe the different things it has to access. When the item is transferred from one place to another, the dynamically allocated pointer can be transferred as well. But in cases when the stack needs to be split, which is happening almost always with Stack Inserter, for example, a new copy of the dynamically allocated class item needs to be created, which is generally slow as well. So this is a mouthful. Hopefully I didn't lose you. I almost lost myself. Essentially, they're trying to simplify the whole thing with like stack amounts and just item stacks. So to solve this, we can take into account the fact that the vast majority of items in a factory are simple items or plates, etc. We will simply just store the basic item data directly in item stack, so it looks like this. Null unless item needs special data, blueprint, armor, which should simplify it quite a lot. They say, though, that it is possible this change might improve performance, but until we actually implement it and test it, we will never know. I'm hoping it will. That would be really cool. So that's kind of the technical stuff. What's the real meat of this, actually, the really, to me, interesting part is the rail block visualization. So if you've watched any of my streams or other people's streams or some other people's videos or played around with it yourself, you may have noticed these markings. In fact, the last couple times I've streamed, and the reason I bring this up is because this is actually, I think, not a very known thing. The last couple times I streamed, I was using this to plan out rails, and I had so many people asking me, like, what mod are you using for this? You know, what mod or what option? And it's not a mod. It's, as they explain here, when you go into the debug menu, which is F4, there's all these options for debug stuff. You can turn on show rail blocks, and that's what this is. And this shows the different rail blocks that are, divided up by signaling and stuff. So they say, while testing our tutorial sample, which focuses mainly on rails and signals, people discovered that we have a debug visualization called show rail blocks, which looks like this when active. So, like I just said, the people were commenting that once they used this, they were able to understand the way signals worked almost instantly. The problem is that the debug options are generally not intended to be used in normal game, as the way these are generated is slowing the render a lot and looks off. It is far from production quality. So that's true. And this actually does help a ton until they actually implement this fully, which we'll go to down below. I would suggest that if you are having problems with rails, or especially like junctions like this, turning these on can be really, really helpful. Like, I found with T-junctions and stuff that it's really hard, kind of, at least for me, in my brain to just look at it and be like, okay, here's a block, here's a block, here's a block, the signals are dividing up and stuff. I look at it and I'm like, okay, I think these signals are right, but it's hard to actually visualize, like, this little part's a block, this little part's a separate block and stuff, and turning this on can be super helpful. So pretty much, if you still don't really understand this, the separate color sections are just the separate rail blocks, and this is how rail signals work in Factorio, is they split rails into blocks. So for example, say a train coming from like this way, this would be right-hand drive, I think, maybe. Yeah, so a train coming from this way, he's in this yellow block, but as soon as he passes, he enters this green block, which is all stuff in here, which means that, any train coming from this way or this way, well, that's the same track. But the point is, this is all one block, so anything in here is going to occupy this whole thing, and then he moves past into the next block, so on and so forth. So this is actually a really helpful option. So they go down to further explain, but it gave us an idea that we should probably provide the visualization in-game properly. We are experimenting with the way it should look, but it might be something conceptually similar to this. So this is pretty much just identical to this, but like kind of lines and little clearer separators than the boxes here, which I actually don't mind this one up here, honestly. This one, I mean, to me looks fine and is easy to understand. This one is certainly not bad either. This one may actually be slightly easier to understand. I'm not sure. I guess it depends. It's a per person basis, but they say the first problem is that using colors is a very practical way to indicate which rails are connected into one segment, but it also makes the game look too much like a circus. We shall see what we can do if we use different than RGB colors for it. Another problem is the question, when exactly should it be shown? Our first guess is to show it whenever building rails or rail signals, but the problem is the amount of indicators you see when building rail signals is starting to be quite too high, which is true. When you go to place a signal, it shows like like a certain amount of rail like or train segments behind it, you know, and then it shows like what way it's pointing, and it shows everywhere it can place a signal, which is already quite busy. So I definitely agree with this. And I mean, they just say here the new rail segment, possible signal positions, positions of trains, direction the train will approach, count of signals in the cursor to be built, so on and so forth. So having it like show up every time you want to place a signal, personally, I think is definitely not the way to do it, because I feel like that could almost confuse you more than help you. That every time you have a signal in your hand to place it, it's like showing all these blocks and stuff. I mean, for me, that would be really confusing, especially starting out with Rails. I'd just be like, what the hell is this stuff? And I would just get so confused. So, you know, they kind of show it here is what it would look like. And this is just super busy. I mean, like, you can't hardly even tell the green line like in here because it's showing all the stuff. So they're definitely right about that. Personally, my personal suggestion, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts as well down in the comments. This is like specifically something I'd like you guys to share your thoughts on how you think this should work. Personally, for me, I think it would be cool to just have it be a toggle, similar to the advanced info with alt, not be tied to that, because a lot of people play with advanced info on all the time, and that would obviously be an issue. But a very similar thing with a different hotkey that only turns on this stuff, I think it would honestly probably be the easiest way to go. That, you know, it doesn't toggle alt info or anything else, it just toggles this bit on and off, and it's just a separate hotkey. I don't know in terms of hotkeys, maybe like Shift R, or I mean, that may conflict with stuff. It probably would. You know, something like that, that I'm sure they could find a hotkey that would not mess really anything else up, that just toggles this on and off. And I think that would be perfect, because it would essentially be like how you turn it on and off in the debug menu now, except not a debug option and simpler, and then obviously implemented fully. And I think that would probably just be the easiest, because you can be building Rails that won't interfere with anything. You can just be like, oh, well, let's just check the blocks really quick. Boom, you hit a hotkey. You can look at it and then hit the hotkey again. It turns off and it's out of your way. I think that would be better. Definitely not when you go to place a signal every time, because I mean, they said, I'm agreeing with them here that this is this is just really, really busy. This would, I mean, even to me who's played the game thousands of hours, this is like, whoa, this is a ton of info. I can only imagine to someone who's new to the game, this is just like beyond confusing. So definitely some thinking to do there. But yeah, definitely share your thoughts, because you guys always have a lot of interesting and great ideas. But that pretty much does it for this one. So pretty interesting. I do like the fact they're going to try to implement this into the game properly, because it is, there's a lot of stuff, and there may be other things in the debug thing which perhaps they could consider implementing. There's a lot of stuff that's really, really helpful in that menu. You just have to be kind of careful and just know that it's not meant to be used always, because like they said, you know, I have noticed when I use some options, performance drops, and it can get like super crazy and busy on the screen depending what options you turn on and stuff. But there's definitely some really helpful things in there. Like there's a show grid option, which can be really helpful with lining stuff up and like counting tiles and stuff. I mean, you can go in there and look, there's just all kind of things that are super helpful that maybe at some point could be implemented with just like into the actual thing normally, like they're thinking of doing here. But anyway, that's it. So the final result is subject to our experiments. I just want to show you the process. As always, let us know if you have any thoughts or feedback. So you can check out the forum discussion, or on the Reddit subreddit. As always, they post there, and there's a lot of great discussions. If you have any, thoughts, share them down in the comments, or on the forum as well is a great place, or the Reddit. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave a like. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.